I stepped into the kitchen and stopped cold. There in the trash bin by the island were my stoneware cups glazed in soft gray and maroon, the very ones I'd shaped with my own hands over the years. Every single one. Stacked like garbage. No newspaper. No care. Just thrown in like scraps. Tessa stood at the counter pouring coffee into a brand new white mug. She looked up at me, not surprised, not apologetic. "They were gross," she said lightly, almost amused. "I bought new ones." She said it while sipping from the pot I had brewed that morning. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. I simply turned and walked out of the kitchen. My feet moved without thought down the short hallway to the office at the back of the house. The walls in here still smelled faintly of wood oil and linen things no one else seemed to notice anymore. I knelt at the file cabinet, pulled open the bottom drawer, and thumbed past folders labeled Utilities, Maintenance, Medical. Then I stopped on the one marked Lease, Upstairs Tenants. I slid it out and laid it flat on the desk. The contract was there, still clipped neatly with its signatures. 30-day notice clause. No subletting. No unauthorized use of homeowner funds. I reread each line, slowly tracing the details I had insisted on including, even when Nolan had rolled his eyes. "Come on, Mom. We're family. Family doesn't throw your hands away. Family doesn't call your work garbage." Outside the office window, the late morning sun crept up over the fence line. The neighbor's dog barked in the distance. I could still hear the faint clink of Tessa setting her new mugs in my cabinets. I closed the folder and rested both hands on it, palms down. It was still my house. And they were still living in it on my terms. They moved in 5 months ago. Just for a while, Nolan had said. 2 or 3 months at most, Mom. We just need to get through the lease on the old place and save a bit. I remember nodding. I even changed the sheets in the guest room before they arrived, washed the curtains, set out a welcome basket. Tessa never thanked me. She walked in with 3 oversized suitcases and a comment about the smell of my soap. They took the upstairs space 2 bedrooms and a bath, but over time, the boundaries blurred. Tessa repainted the hallway walls without asking, then swapped out the shower curtain I'd left for one she called less depressing. I bit my tongue. I was still adjusting to their rhythms and their noise. Then the furniture shifted. A chair moved from the den to make space for a bassinet. Kitchen towels disappeared. A whole stack of ceramic bowls I'd made quietly vanished one weekend, replaced by glossy white sets from a store downtown. I didn't ask where they went. I didn't want the answer. I tried to hold on to the little routines that made this place mine. Morning tea in the sunroom. Folding laundry to the hum of classical radio. But each habit now shared a wall with something louder. Tessa's blender. Nolan's phone calls, a podcast on speaker, echoing down the stairs. This morning, I went to retrieve my pruning shears from the shed. I had planned to cut back the rosemary bush, give it air before the season turned. The door barely opened. Boxes were stacked everywhere. Baby clothes, plastic toys still in their packaging, something labeled donation later. My gardening gloves were crammed beneath a high chair. I stood there holding the edge of the door, wondering how long it had been since anyone asked before they filled a space. I didn't pull the gloves out. I shut the shed, gently, walked back inside, and sat with my tea in the laundry room, because it was the only room no one had touched. That evening, dinner felt like a meeting I hadn't agreed to attend. Nolan brought it up while slicing chicken at the counter. "We really should get rid of some of the clutter, Mom. Half the cabinets are full of old pottery." Old pottery. That was what he called the cups I'd made by hand, the ones his father used every morning before work. Tessa laughed from the table. "She's just sentimental about garbage. It's fine, Nolan. I already handled it." She said it like she'd done me a favor. I kept my tone even. "Please don't throw away anything else that isn't yours." Tessa rolled her eyes. "We're just trying to make this place livable." It already was, I wanted to say. It had been livable for 30 years before she walked through the door. When Nolan changed the subject to bills, I saw my chance. About the groceries, I said. I'd prefer to pay for what I use. Please stop using my card. He froze, knife in hand. Didn't you say we could handle groceries while we're here? I said you could handle them, I corrected. Not with my money. Tessa let out a sharp laugh. Oh, come on, it's all family. We'll pay you back when we're not drowning in baby stuff. I'm not asking for repayment. I'm asking for boundaries. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. I finished eating quietly, stacked my plate, and went to my office. The habit of checking my bank account had become a small act of self-protection. I opened the app, expecting to see a few groceries, maybe gas. Instead, there it was, $812 charged at a home goods store under Tessa's name. 3 days ago. I scrolled further. Matching charges appeared: decor, storage bins, a coffee press. All recent, all hers. Down the hall, I could still hear their voices muffled, but Bright planning something upstairs. I closed the phone, locked the screen, and sat very still. The next morning, the bank called. The call came early the next morning, just as I was rinsing the breakfast dishes. Mrs. Travers, this is the fraud department with Cascade Bank. We're calling to verify a request to add a co-user to your credit account. The applicant's name is Tessa Reynolds. The plate slipped from my hand and hit the sink with a dull thud. I didn't authorize that, I said. The woman on the line hesitated. We assumed not given your account type. We've already declined the request, but you may wish to update your authorization preferences. I thanked her, hung up, and stood there for a long moment, the sound of running water filling the silence. A co-user. She had tried to make herself legal on my card. By noon, I had called Daphne. She answered on the first ring, her voice brisk but warm. Aunt Mari, what's going on? I told her everything slowly, carefully, like laying out shards of glass on a towel. When I finished, there was only her quiet breathing on the other end. You still have that lease I drafted for them, right? She asked finally. In the drawer. Good. Don't say anything to them yet. I'll come by after work. That evening, she arrived with her laptop and a look I remembered from her early law school days, the one that meant she was going to fix something. We sat at the dining table while she read through the papers Nolan had signed months ago. You did well keeping this, she said. 30-day termination clause, reimbursement for damages, and full financial separation. It's airtight. I almost laughed. They probably never even read it. Most people don't, Daphne replied, until they need to. She highlighted a few lines, printed an extra copy, and slid it toward me. If they push again, serve this notice. It gives you control back. I nodded, tracing my finger along the typed names. My own signature looked steadier than I felt. After she left, I locked the lease in the drawer again. Upstairs, I heard footsteps. The sound of Tessa's laughter drifting through the ceiling. I got home just after 6. The porch light was off, which usually meant they weren't expecting me or didn't care. I walked down the hallway and stopped at the guest room door. It was open. Empty. The bookshelf was gone. The reading lamp I'd had since the 80s was unplugged and shoved to the corner. My favorite quilt, the one with hand-stitched hexagons, was folded in a heap on the floor like a forgotten towel. Tessa stepped in behind me, phone in hand. Oh, you're back early. I didn't respond. I was staring at the bare mattress. She continued like it was nothing. So, my mother's coming next week. We need the space. Hope that's okay. Before I could say a word, Nolan leaned against the doorframe. You still have your little room downstairs, Mom. It's just a few weeks. They spoke like I wasn't standing there, like the room had never been mine. I walked past them without a word, grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, and stepped outside. It had started to rain just lightly, the kind that soaks through your sleeves before you notice. I didn't even take time to change. I just drove. 20 minutes later, I was at Ellen's. She didn't ask questions. Just boiled water handed me a chipped mug and sat across from me. We didn't talk for a while. Then I said, "They treat me like I'm temporary." Ellen looked at me gently. "But I own the walls," I added almost to myself. It was the first time I said it out loud, not in anger, not as a threat, just as fact. Ellen nodded, reached across the table and touched my hand once before, getting up to slice pie. When I got home that night, the quilt was still on the floor. I picked it up, folded it tighter, and took it to my office. The next morning, I started typing the notice. I woke early before the sun came in through the blinds. The house was still. There was no blender whirring upstairs, no thuds of feet coming down the staircase, no voices bouncing through the halls like I wasn't home. I turned on the desk lamp and opened the folder again. The lease was there, clean and binding. They'd signed it. Every clause was intact. I opened a blank document and began typing. Notice of termination, 30 days. I wrote it formally with dates and bullet points, but not without feeling. Under reason, I wrote, repeated use of homeowners' funds without consent, violation of shared space agreement, refusal to maintain boundaries and property access. Then I listed the unpaid rent €0 because I never charged them. Then the utilities 3 months of water and power split evenly, which they never offered to cover. Then the unauthorized expenses, $812. At the bottom, I added, if damage to property is found upon inspection, security deposit will be considered forfeit. There was no security deposit, of course, but the sentence still mattered. I read the whole thing twice. It was cold, but not cruel. They had pushed without asking. I had warned without yelling. Now it was time to act without discussion. I printed 2 copies. One went into the file cabinet. The other I slid into a plain envelope and sealed. The coffee was already brewing when I stepped into the kitchen. Tessa's new mugs were lined up on the rack like catalog props. I placed the envelope next to the machine, just beside one of my last remaining cups, the one with the blue glazing that reminded me of tide pools. I didn't wait for anyone to find it. I slipped on my jacket and stepped outside. The air was cool and steady. My boots pressed against wet leaves on the sidewalk. I didn't go anywhere in particular. I just walked until my chest stopped tightening. By the time I returned, their voices had risen again upstairs, and the envelope was gone from the counter. It didn't take long. By noon, I heard her shouting from the top of the stairs, "You're evicting us from your own son's house." Her voice hit the walls like glass. I looked up from my cup of tea. "It's my house," I said evenly. "And you both signed that paper." Tessa stomped down the last few steps, waving the notice in the air. "This is insane. We're family." "Who does this to family?" Behind her. Nolan appeared, shirt half-tucked, still holding his phone. "Mom, what are you doing?" "You couldn't even talk to us first?" "I did," I said. "You just didn't hear me." Tessa laughed sharply. "So this is it. You kick us out and feel good about it. This isn't about feeling good. It's about what's fair." Nolan's tone hardened. "You're being petty?" I stood then, slow and deliberate, and opened the folder that had been waiting on the table. Inside were photographs of the porch railing sheared off by their last delivery receipts from utilities that had tripled since they arrived, and a printed email from Daphne confirming the legality of the notice. I spread each page across the table. This isn't pettiness. These are numbers, dates, and signatures. You can look at all of them. Tessa crossed her arms. "You planned this." I prepared, I corrected. For a moment, no one spoke. Nolan rubbed his forehead, glancing between us. "We can work this out right." I shook my head. "It's already worked out. You have 30 days. Use them wisely." Tessa turned away first, muttering under her breath, her voice cracking somewhere between anger and disbelief. Nolan followed her, closing the door upstairs harder than he needed to. I gathered the papers, stacked them neatly, and slid them back into the folder. My hands didn't shake this time. Through the ceiling, I heard muffled arguing, her voice high, his low and strained. The house had never felt quieter than in the pauses between them. That night, I locked the office door and began drafting the inventory list. The boxes came slowly at first, 2 by the staircase, 1 by the door. Then 5 more stacked in a tower against the entryway wall. Tessa moved through the house like a thundercloud, slamming cabinets harder than necessary, muttering to herself as she taped flaps shut. Nolan barely spoke. He moved quietly, mostly at night, carrying bundles down to the garage when he thought I was asleep. But I heard the steps. I always heard everything in this house. They didn't ask for help. I didn't offer. The silence had shape now, like a wall being built brick by brick. But I didn't try to knock it down. One afternoon, I came home from the store and heard nothing but the soft whir of the fridge. No footsteps, no doors, just stillness. I set the groceries down and noticed the sink. All 6 of Tessa's new ceramic mugs shattered. Some cracked down the center, others splintered into jagged halves. No note, no explanation. I stood there looking at the mess. No one came forward. No one apologized, and I didn't ask. Instead, I went to the back room, pulled out the old bin of clay I hadn't touched in months, and brought it to the kitchen. I spread out my tools on the table: rolling pin, cutting wire, loop tools, sponges. I took a deep breath, pressed my hands into the cool clay, and started forming a new cup. That evening, I shaped 2 more. The next day, 4. By the end of the week, a full set lined the windowsill waiting to dry. They didn't say a word about the mugs, or the notice, or the deadline on the fridge. But the air in the house had changed. It moved differently, less weight in the hallway, less tension hanging off the doorknobs. Each box they taped shut seemed to give the rooms back their breath. I cleaned the shed. I found my gloves again. I stacked firewood the way I used to, 3 rows deep. And when I passed the empty spot on the shelf where their blender used to sit, I smiled once and kept walking. They didn't slam the door. They didn't even say goodbye. I watched from the window as Nolan loaded the last box into the back seat. Tessa stood with her arms crossed, sunglasses on, despite the overcast sky. The trunk clicked shut. No hugs, no second looks. Just the hollow sound of an engine starting and tires rolling down the drive. And then nothing. I waited a few minutes just to be sure. Then I walked through the house, slowly, barefoot, room by room. The guest room was bare again. The dresser drawers open and emptied. A faint scent of floral perfume lingered in the closet. Upstairs, the bathroom smelled like her shampoo, sharp and expensive, clinging to the tile. The kitchen still had fingerprints on the fridge door and a single mug left in the sink, chipped at the lip handle, cracked halfway through. I picked it up, turned it in my hands, and placed it in the bin. Down the hallway, I opened each window, one by one. Let the air shift. Let it carry everything out: the tension, the hovering questions, the second guessing. The house didn't feel big. It felt honest. Honest in the way silence always is when it's no longer afraid of being misunderstood. I went to the storage closet and pulled out the old sewing machine, the one I used to keep in the corner before it was boxed up to make space for their stroller. I wiped the dust from its cover, ran a piece of fabric beneath the needle, and listened to the quiet click as it lowered into place. In the kitchen, I made tea. Not with one of the new cups, but an old one. Gray glaze slightly warped, a fine crack tracing the rim like a soft scar. I'd kept it anyway. I sat at the table, hands around the warmth, and breathed. No voices overhead, no footsteps pacing, no sharp comments from behind walls, only the sound of the house exhaling. Later, I folded fresh towels for the upstairs linen closet. 2 weeks passed without a knock at the door. The mornings were still and the quiet stayed soft. I swept the floors without dodging shoes, cooked without asking whose groceries were whose. The house had returned to itself, and so had I. I spent an afternoon in the garage sorting through scraps of pine. Cut, sanded, and stained a narrow shelf, nothing fancy, just wide enough for what I needed it to hold. I mounted it above the counter where the clutter used to gather. Not for spices, not for formula bottles or snack bins or things I didn't use. This one was for my cups, the ones I made, the ones that stayed. Each piece went up slowly, one with a swirl of copper along the lip, one with a thumbprint near the base. A set of 3 I'd glazed in a soft, dusty green. They caught the late morning light beautifully. I joined the ceramics group again, the same one I used to teach at before the long pause. I told them I wasn't looking to sell. I just wanted my hands back in the clay. They understood. The house smelled like chamomile and fresh laundry. I found a rhythm I hadn't realized I'd missed. The sound of the sewing machine, the click of the kiln warming, the tap of a teaspoon against stoneware. On a Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from Nolan. "Can we talk?" No apology, no explanation, just that. I read it once, then again. I didn't delete it, but I didn't answer either. I walked to the kitchen and refilled my cup. One of the older ones, its glaze deepened by time. The weight felt good in my hand. Outside, a breeze moved through the trees, rustling the leaves just enough to remind me the seasons were shifting again. I placed another cup on the shelf. There was still space left,